Hey Nour, I have a problem with you.
What?
6 of them.
Michael.
And I want them in writing.
Michael.
I'm conflicted.
You're stupid.
I'm Michael.
Hey guys, Nour here, and today we're talking about 6 types of conflicts in writing. A conflict is the driving force in a story. Duh! Without it, we'd be bored and fall asleep. It's why we always want to read the next chapter or watch the next episode of whatever we're binging. Conflict makes the story world go round. Besides, we enjoy starting in a rough place in a story and then ending in a big breakthrough. And the conflict is what makes this possible. Which is why today I wanted to talk about the 6 types of conflicts you could use in your writing, and then I have a bonus tip for you. Personally, I love conflicts, and I know the majority, if not all, of writers and readers do too. Even if your story is more character-driven than plot-driven, you will still need some type of conflict. So without further ado, let's dive in. Number 1, man versus self. This one is pretty straightforward. It's when a character has an internal conflict. For example, they're not sure what to choose in life, or they have inner demons that continuously nag at them. The demons aren't actual demons, by the way. That was just a metaphor in case you didn't know that already. Basically, it's a character having a personal struggle that only they control or choose to ignore. That sounds complicated, so let me give some examples. Let's say a character has a mental illness or a phobia. That can be internal conflict. If they regularly think that voices are talking inside their head and can't figure out how to get them out, that's man versus self. If they have a fear of something and only they can help themselves get over it, then that's man versus self. A great example of this type of conflict takes place in the nonfiction book Wild by Cheryl Strayed. The author writes about her journey and internal struggle after her mom passed away, and she shows us all the pain she went through because of her refusal to move on. Number 2, man versus man. This is another obvious conflict. Obviously, it's external conflict, and it's actually the most common type of conflict writers use. Man versus man is pretty much the protagonist fighting the antagonist. This is usually good versus bad, but it could also be the anti-hero against other characters. Number 3, man versus society. This type of conflict can be found in dystopian books a lot of times. Or just books where society is the main issue. Think of 1984, Brave New World, The Hunger Games, The Giver, and the list goes on. In a lot of these books, the characters can still have other types of conflicts, such as internal conflict or man versus man conflict. But society remains the main culprit or antagonist at play. In the book Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, for instance, the main character is running away from a bad man while simultaneously fighting and attempting to change the society that he lives in. Number 4, man versus nature. This is literally nature being the conflict of the story. Nature can be hurricanes, fires, earthquakes, and so on. A well-known book that delves into this conflict is A Life of Pi. A storm pretty much destroys the ship that Pi is on with his family, and that leaves him stranded at sea on a tiny lifeboat with a bunch of animals, including a tiger. So yeah, that's man versus nature. Now obviously there are many other conflicts in this story, but that's the main conflict that basically disrupts the story. So yeah, that's man versus nature. Number 5, man versus machine. Now this can be robots or it can be literal machines. It can even be a person struggling to keep his job while machines threaten to replace him at work. If you want a good man versus machine story, you'll find it in the sci-fi aisle. A good movie with this conflict is Ex Machina. Number 6, man versus fate. This often takes place in supernatural books, where the character feels that they're not really in charge of their own destiny, but rather predestined for something. Their fate is set in stone, and they're struggling to break or change that fate. Will they be able to do it? Funny enough, I think my book Divinity Falling falls into this type of conflict. Obviously, there are also other types of conflicts in my book, like man versus man and man versus self, but man versus fate does play a role. My main character Addie was born with a supernatural power, but this power also seals her fate, so now she must change that fate. Okay, so those are the 6 types of conflicts, but I did promise you a bonus tip. When you choose a conflict for your story, remember that you should have a main conflict and then side conflicts. which are better known as subplots. Your main conflict can be any of these 6 types of conflicts I mentioned today. And your subplots can be small issues that your character has along their journey, such as a love interest that they can't figure out or a friendship that they hurt. It's important to have a big conflict to drive the story, but it's also important to have smaller conflicts that help your characters grow as people. So there you have it, 6 types of conflicts you can use in your writing. Let me know in the comments, what's your favorite type of conflict? And lastly, before we leave, I just want to give a quick shout out to Sarah Frayne from my shoutouts here over on Patreon, as well as all my other patrons. Thank you so much for your support. If you haven't checked out my Patreon yet, I definitely encourage you to do so. All my patrons get some awesome exclusive perks. And if you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I post helpful writing advice videos as well as funny writing skits. Plus, follow me on social media for more writing content and just to see what I'm up to. And remember, Nour for president!